Do you need a complete list of all your sheets in Excel? If you have 20, 50, or even 100 sheets, you don't want to go through the whole list by hand. Learn the methods in this video and you won't have to. Instead, you will be able to generate a perfect list of all your sheets error-free and in record time. I'll show you how to use a secret formula that almost nobody knows about. And then I'll take it to the next level by showing you how to code a solution with VBA, that's Visual Basic for Applications. You'll create a list of sheet names that you can click on like a table of contents. And when you click on the back button, you'll instantly go back to your list of sheets. I've broken down this video into 10 levels so it's easier to follow. And if you want to get straight into the VBA solution, it starts at level 3. Let's get going. Here's a couple of tricks if you really want to do this by hand. You can go down to the left-hand side, right-click here, and you'll see a list of sheets that you can copy from, either straight into Excel or into a text document. And here's a second tip. You can go up to the View menu and click on New Window. Then you can go back to View and click on Arrange All. Then you can arrange all vertically and click OK. And that gives you a side-by-side view that you can use to insert the sheet names here. And you can then scroll on the other side and keep these in view as you type. But as you can see, it's slow and it's error prone, so you don't want to do that. Let's move on to the next level. Let's use formulas to do the work for us. We're going to use this get.workbook function, which is an old Excel 4.0 macro function. So if I typed it straight into a cell like this, you see it produces an error. So instead, I'm going to go and create a named range. Go to Formulas, go to the Name Manager, and click on New. We will set the name to be Get Sheets, and we'll change it to refer to get.workbook open one close, and T open now, open close close. Click on OK, then close the dialog box. And we can get a list of the sheets by typing transpose get sheets. I have Excel 365, so that's automatically spilled all of these sheet names in this workbook. Now, quick explanation. There are two parts to the formula we used. The first one just returns the name of the workbook. And the second part adds a blank to the end result. Why? We do this to trigger automatic recalculation of the named range. So now open close returns the current time, and the T function changes that to a blank. Now we'd like to get rid of the workbook name, so we're just left with the sheet names. To do that, we're going to use the replace function, and we're going to replace the file name. So the replace function has 4 different arguments. It's going to replace the old text, in this case in get sheets, and it's going to start at number 1, the first character. And then it's going to go for the number of characters here, which we are going to find out using the find function. That's going to count the characters to the end of the file name by looking for this closed square bracket. And then it's going to replace the text with a blank, which is these double quote marks. So let's add that to a name. Go back up and click on the Name Manager. Click on New to define a new named range. We're going to call this one Sheet Names. I'm going to make it refer to replace open get sheets, comma 1, comma find open quote marks, close square bracket, quote marks, comma get sheets, close, comma double quote marks, close. Click on OK and close the dialog box. Now we can enter the formula equals transpose sheet names, and that gives us a list of all the sheets. Now this is great if you have Excel 365 or Excel 2021, but if you have an older version of Excel, we'll need to do something different. Let's start with the function row. So equals row, open A1, close, enter, and I'll drag this down, and that produces a list of the numbers from 1, 2, 3, and onwards, according to the row number. Next, we're going to change that by using the index function, index, open sheet names, comma, and at the end we'll close the parenthesis, hit enter, and you see that's changed it from the row number to the sheet name, because it's looking in that named range sheet names, and it's just pulling together each of the names. But you also notice there's a ref error here, and so that's happening because the index function can't find any sheets after the last sheet. So we're going to just make one more modification, which equals if error, then if there's no error, this is the value. But if there is an error, we're going to just replace it with a minus sign. And when I drag that down, you'll see we have our list of names. But this is still quite a manual process. We can take it further in the next level. Level 3. It's time to automate. We'll use our VBA helper to list all the sheets for us. It will go through each sheet and write down the sheets one at a time, like this. But wait, isn't that the same as what we did with formulas? No, because we're going to add a new feature. If there are hidden sheets, our VBA helper can skip over them. Let's see how it's done. Here's a workbook with 100 sheets. To use the Visual Basic editor, we need to right-click on the ribbon, click on Customize the ribbon, and scroll down till we see the Developer checkbox. Now, select Developer checkbox, click OK, and you'll see this new Developer menu, and click on Visual Basic, or use the shortcut Alt and F11. This brings up the Visual Basic editor. Now I've set this up so that there's one code module for each of the 10 levels inside this video. But if you open a new workbook, you'll need to right-click inside the Project window and click on Insert and select Module. Now you can rename your module inside the Properties window here, but we already have enough code modules, so I'll right-click and remove Module 1. I will not export it, and so we're in the code module for Level 3. The first thing we'll do is create a sub-procedure by typing sub and the name level _3 single column, open and close parentheses, hit enter. And I'm going to save some time. I'm going to start with a variable block, but I'll speed this up. And so we have 3 different variables. One is a worksheet, and these 2 are integers, whole numbers. Next, we're going to create a new sheet and add it to the front of the workbook. Again, I'll speed this up, save time. And we'll give it a name. wslist.name equals quote marks sheet list. That's the name you'll see in the workbook. Next, I'm going to initialize the row number. And then we're going to loop through all the sheets in the workbook and list their names, making sure we don't include sheet list in that list. And there we have the loop where we're going to go through all the sheets in the workbook, list their names, and ensure we don't include sheet list. Now, before we run this, we head to debug and click on compile just to make sure there are no errors. And now we'll hit this green run button, or we can press F5 and look inside Excel. We have a new sheet list and the numbers from 1 down to 100. So all the sheets are named here. Let's add a toggle to show and hide hidden sheets. So I've defined a constant const that's called show hidden as Boolean, and we're going to set that as false. So a Boolean is either true or false. In this case, we're setting it to false to hide hidden sheets. If we were to change it to true, we'd show hidden sheets. Next, I'm going to change the row number because I think it's easier to read if it's 1 instead of 0. So let me just quickly change where I place this to make sure the logic works, because after we list the name, we want to be able to add the row number. So now it's going to start off at row number 1. And finally, I'm going to update this loop so it can toggle hidden sheets on or off. So this for loop is going to go through all the sheets from 1 to the total number of sheets in this workbook. And then with that sheet, it's going to check if the name is not sheet list and either this show hidden constant is true or the visible property is true, which means we can see the sheet. So if those conditions are fulfilled, we are going to list the sheet and then we'll increase the row number by 1. Let's see this in action. If I head over here and then I will click on sheet 1, hold shift and click on sheet 5, I'll right click and then click on hide. Now when I come back into the VB editor, click in here and hit run. We'll go back to check in Excel. You see sheets 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are not listed, and the list starts at sheet 6. So we've used our VBA helper to create a list of sheets in a single column and add a toggle to show or hide hidden sheets. What else can we do? Level 4. Let's go a step further. We'll add 3 new features. 1. Add a bold header called list of sheets. 2. Add sheet numbering to help count the sheets. And 3. Auto-fit columns to improve appearance. We'll start with the level 3 code. First thing we want to do is add a bold header. To do that, I'm going to add a few lines of code here. I'm going to use a with end construct. I'm going to set the value to be list of sheets. And I'm going to make the font to be bold. So those 4 lines will go to range A1, change the value of what's inside A1 to list of sheets, and then change the font to bold. Let's now set the initial row number to 2 because we have a bold header on row 1. So we want to start the list of sheets on row 2. And while we're here, we better change level 3 to level 4 so we don't get confused. Now let's add sheet numbers. To do that, I'm going to create a new variable, dim sheet counter, and make that an integer. That's a whole number. And then we're going to set it to 1. So we'll start the count at 1. Sheet counter equals 1. And finally, we need to make a change to the if statement. So what this does is it will add the counter, then a period and a space in front of the sheet name. And finally, we want to add 1 to the sheet counter. So this bit of code will now add the sheet counter in front of the sheet name. And the final thing we want to do is auto-fit the column width. And I'll add some code here to auto-fit the column. So now let's run this code. I'm going to hit the run button. I'm going to go into Excel. We see in A1 the bold header that says list of sheets. And in A2, we see number 1, which is sheet 6, because sheets 1 to 5 are hidden. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So with this method, we could scroll all the way down to the bottom and count how many sheets there are. In this case, 95, because we have hidden 5 of them. That's great. But now what happens if I click back into this sub-procedure and I hit run again? Oh look, there's a runtime error. That name is already taken. The problem is we're trying to create a new sheet called sheet list, but there's already one there. So how do we fix that? We'll do that next. Level 5. It's time to improve our VBA helper. We'll add error checking to see if the sheet list already exists. This helps our VBA helper not to be confused if there's already a sheet list in our workbook. By the way, if you like learning about Excel and automation, please subscribe to my channel to make sure you get my latest videos. Let's add error checking. I'm going to copy and paste the code from level 4. Now the first thing I'm going to do is change this to level 5, and then I'll add a comment. So we know to check if the sheet list already exists and create it if it doesn't. This has to be the first thing we do. So I'm going to add it just after we declare variables. Let's first check if sheet list already exists and select if it does. So what that does is check if the list of sheet names already exists. And if that sheet exists, just select it. Now, if it doesn't exist, what we need to do is create it first. On the other hand, if this sheet list already exists, then what we're going to do is clear any existing content. And there we have it. These lines here are what we added, and this will help us to check if there's a sheet already in place. Let's see what happens when we run this. Before we do, come back here. You see there's this sheet called sheet list. So it already has the list we generated earlier. If we were to run this in level 4, we'd get an error. But let's see what happens when we run this in level 5. There's no error, and it seems to have generated a list. Let's check if it actually works if we unhide sheets 1 to 5, and then head back into here and run it. Go back to Excel, sheet list. Look, it's updated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So that's nice. However, you do notice all these sheets just keep going on and on. How do we make it so that they fit nicely in a view going across instead of down? Let's have a look at that next. Level 6. If we have a lot of worksheets to list, they end up going off the screen. To make it easier to see, we'll set a bottom row and make sure our VBA helper doesn't go past that row. So we end up with a list of sheet names going across the screen and not just down. Let's make it happen. Let's change what we had in level 5 to level 6. And I'm going to replace this comment. And the first thing we'll do is make sure we set a bottom row for each column. In this case, I've created this constant called max rows and set it to be an integer, a whole number. And I've set this value to 11, so we won't go past row 11. Next, we're going to initialize the variable so we can use it to count the column numbers. And then we scroll down here to see where we set the initial row number. Now we've got to set the initial column number as well. I'm going to change that. And I'll add a line here for the column number. Then we'll come down here when we loop through all the sheets, when we add the sheet name and the number to the list. Instead of adding it to the row number and the first column, we're going to add it to the row number and the column number. And finally, we've got to check if we've hit the maximum rows limit. And if we have, then reset the row number and increase the column number. And there we have it. Now let's test this works. I'll head up to the play button. We look on the left, we see the list of sheets, and we see all the sheets that only go down to row 11. And then they wrap up again to the next column, and then again to the next column. So we have all 100 sheets visible on one page. Now that's nice. However, as you can see, it's a bit hard to read these sheets. So what can we do about that? Level 7. Let's add some padding so that the columns aren't so narrow. Like this, but with VBA. First, we'll change the name of this from level 6 to level 7. And then I'll change the comment. Now we're going to scroll all the way down to the end of this subroutine where it says auto fit column. We're going to change this so we auto fit the columns with extra space for padding. And we'll do that by calling a new subroutine that we're going to write just here. Soon this will make sense. So let's get started with writing the subroutine. I'm going to call it sub auto fit columns on sheet. And I'm going to pass two variables inside. The first variable is worksheet variable here. And the second one is a single to specify the extra space. Let's add a few comments too. So what we're going to do is make sure that the columns are all set to the same width as the widest column. Let's initialize some variables. So we'll use I as a counter. Col is the column object. And max width specifies the width of the column. Now before we go further, let's turn off screen updating so that we don't see any flicker on Excel when we run the macro. And now we proceed to write the main part of the procedure. So this first part will auto-fit all the columns in the used range of the past worksheet. So this worksheet comes from what we pass inside, and that will come from up here. So you see this workbook.worksheets list.name. That gets passed into WS, and that WS is checked for the used range, and all the columns of that used range are auto-fitted. Next, we're going to find the maximum column width. And so we'll go through each col in columns, and if the column's column width is more than the maximum width, then we could set the maximum width to be the column's column width. So just make sure we find the maximum column width. And next, we're going to add some extra space for padding based on the maximum width and our extra space that we pass in here. And so what we're doing is taking this extra space as a single. That comes, in this case, it will be number 3. So that 3 comes into extra space, and that extra space is used down here. So we're going to set the column's column width to be the maximum width plus this extra space for padding. And finally, we're going to turn back screen updating so we can see what's happening. Now, let's test the macro. We can't run this macro because it needs some inputs. So we need to run the macro up here to specify the inputs. So I'm going to click inside the first macro and then press the play button. And look, we have a list of sheets with sheet numbers from 1 to 10 wrapping around with extra space. And if I come back here and change this from 3 to say a 2 and run it again, you'll see the space changes. And I could even reduce it to a 1 and try that again. And so you can play around with the space that you find useful. Currently, we just have a list of sheets, and that's fine, but we can make this something special. How about we make these clickable? Level 8. Let's find out how to add internal hyperlinks so we can click on a sheet name and go straight to it. What we'll end up doing is creating a simple table of contents by adding these hyperlinks to each sheet name. First thing we'll do is change this from level 7 to level 8, and I'll change the comment. Next, we'll scroll all the way down to find this for loop where we loop through all the sheets and list their names based on visibility. What we're going to do is, instead of add a sheet name and number to the list, we'll replace this bit of code with a bit of code that creates the hyperlink to the sheet. Right, so now we have that code. Let me just drag this over to show you. We have 4 different lines, and you notice I've added an underscore after each part of this, so it's still part of the same command, but it's split over multiple lines. And we have 4 different parameters here: anchor, address, subaddress, and text to display. So the anchor is the anchor for the hyperlink. That's where you click. So it can either be a cell or a range or a shape. The address is the web address, the URL, if you are linking this to a website. The subaddress is what we use. So we've just specified cell A1 of this workbook sheets and the sheet that we've counted to. So we're going to make the subaddress the sheet plus cell A1. And then the text that we're going to display is the same as before. So we'll have the sheet counter with a period, space, and the sheet name. So I'll hit the run button, and look on the left, we now have a list of sheets, and they've become blue. This is the default formatting for hyperlinks. If I click on one, like 14, you see I get taken to sheet 14. And that's cool, but what if I want to go back? Now I have to go all the way down, right click, and select sheet list, and click OK. But I want to be able to select, say, a sheet here, and then go back more quickly. Let's find out how to do that next. Level 9. Let's add back buttons on each sheet to make it quick to navigate back to the sheet list. Change this from level 8 to level 9, and then I'll change this. Now, we're not going to change anything in here. We're actually going to scroll all the way down and add a line here. And what we're going to do is we're going to call a new macro. And we're going to place a new macro just underneath. Let's first declare a few variables. And we'll create this loop to go through all the sheets. Okay, next we're going to skip the sheet list worksheet. For every other sheet, we're going to apply what's inside this loop. And we'll do that by going through each button in the worksheet's shapes and checking if it exists. So if it exists, we'll delete it because we're going to create it again. Next, we're going to add the button. And we're going to specify some properties for it. And finally, we'll assign this button that we've created to a macro. So when we click the button, we'll run the macro. And finally, we'll add a little macro here to take us back to the sheet list. So now let's test this out. I'll scroll up and select this subroutine, press play. We come to the list of sheets. Let's click on sheet 50. And we see there's a new button that's called sheet list. And if I click on that, it takes me straight back to the list of sheets. Ta-da! And there's one more thing we're going to do in the next level. Level 10. So far, we've been running our VBA helper by hand, but we can make it trigger automatically. When we click on sheet list, our VBA helper will jump into action. How do we make this happen? We use the Activate Worksheet event. Let's add this feature to our workbook. Let's double-click on sheet 107, which is my sheet list. This opens the code window, and everything we write in here belongs to sheet list. So I'm going to copy and paste all the code from level 9 and scroll back up to the top. Now, we want this subroutine, and I'm going to rename this to list underscore all underscore sheets underscore TOC. And this was going to list all worksheets and add hyperlinks. So we want this to run as soon as the worksheet is activated. How do we do that? Well, click on this dropdown, click on worksheet, and where it says selection change, click on that dropdown and select activate. So you'll see the code's been added down here. Let's move it all the way to the top. I'm going to cut that and paste it here so it's easy to find. And now I'm going to delete this because we don't need the selection change event. We're interested in the worksheet activate event. So let's add some code to it. First, we'll turn off screen updating. Then we'll call the list all sheets TOC subroutine. This is a line that will run the procedure as soon as the worksheet is activated. And finally, let's turn screen updating back on. Now here's a little pro tip. Before we try running this program, I advise you to rename the code name of this sheet to sheet 0. So head down to the properties. Right now, code name is sheet 107. So we'll edit this to say sheet 0. And what you'll notice is this brings the sheet list sheet all the way to the top of the list of sheets, so it's easy to find. And now we can test this works. Let's head over to Excel. I'm going to rename sheet 1. Let's call it sheet A. Then I'm going to return to sheet list. And you'll see that it now lists sheet 1 as sheet A. I can then use this as a clickable table of contents, and it will update whenever I click on sheet list. I hope you can see just how useful Excel VBA can be. Check the video description for a list of awesome resources, and make sure you subscribe to get my latest videos. See you next time.